Hi everybody, I hope you're well. This video comes unsurprisingly as a follow-up to the one I sent a few days ago prior to the US elections, and anybody who was able at least to plough through the 21 minutes and even the covering email actually talked about how really summarising my 5 days of talks down into a digestible video, it focused on what was thought at the time by pretty well everybody to be the most likely outcome, which was a fairly tight election, a very close election, and that therefore meant that a lot of the proposals would have a hard time finding their passage through the Senate and the House as required, and therefore that was the outlook there that then set the pace for markets and economies and all the rest of it. But as we've all seen, it was almost described as a landslide victory for the Republicans, and that's meant that having control in most likely of the Senate and the House means that the passageway for those proposed policies that have been talked about for the last couple of months is far more likely, far more certain. So the talk now has turned to that naturally, and I thought this updated video might help a little bit in that regard. So if I can summarise, we've been getting a lot of updates and other things, and I've looked through my notes from the conversations we had in the event that this would happen while we're, when we're meeting people over in the States, and I think that I mentioned in that earlier video that a lot of these policy proposals that have been put forward from both sides were really quite highly inflationary. So a lot of the emphasis or conversation so far already is centred around what that might mean. The first thing, probably the policy issues we should talk about just quickly, and again I'll make it fairly brief if I can, but there's a whole range of fiscally expansionary and regulatory or deregulatory and protectionist policies that have been proposed, and that's all part of this realigning America first that the Republicans were pushing, and sort of redefining relationships around the world that their strategists and the Republican Party seem to think had America in the backseat or being hard done by. So the first thing that'll probably go ahead is the tariffs that everyone's been speaking about today and yesterday, but also the personal and corporate tax cuts, which have been in place for a little while but are due to expire. So there seems little doubt that they'll be renewed or be made more permanent. But then also the tariffs. Now that's long been known to be rather than just talk or threats or anything else, but the Republican Party and Donald Trump in particular really believe in tariffs, and so there seems little doubt that they'll be pushed through as a high priority. So the policy or the conversation or the proposals so far have been a 10 to 20% tariffs on all imports from any other country around the world, and particularly aimed at China, which was to have a 60% tariff. Now, of course, that would have an immediate effect of those items being more costly for American consumers who are buying imported products, but also for American manufacturers who import base materials from other places to make their goods. So it'll be interesting how that plays out, because, like I said, it's inflationary. It'll increase costs. So while the idea of it is to bring manufacturing back onshore and all the rest of it, it's impossible to insulate that entirely. So it's expected, therefore, that'll be a fairly gradual and phased approach. And what you can expect as well, of course, is that there'll be those tit for tat kind of responses where other countries will look at imposing their own tariffs, and so it's probably more likely that these things will be negotiated through, and we've seen that over the past two periods of government there in America as well, where things were talked about and introduced and then recalibrated as they go. Interestingly, I think for Australia too, is that with the target being China so much too, then that'll impact on us for sure, with us being such big suppliers to China of all sorts of raw materials. So we'll see how that goes. It should lead to more inflation. It's potentially slowing growth in the US, China, European countries. And one of the other policies too that will no doubt come into some impact is those wholesale deportations of a lot of the illegal or undocumented immigrants who flooded into the States in the last 4 years. That's a fact, by the way, and seen as one of the things that turned people against the Democrats, maybe more so than was expected, as it happens, because while there was an awful lot of undocumented people coming in the first 3 years of the Biden administration, in the past 12 months the Democrats seemed to realise that and that it wasn't popular and took action against it, which kind of highlighted maybe that they had lost control a little bit of it in the early stages, and of course that sends a message which obviously didn't resonate well with certain sectors, at least of the population. So that was a real thing, and that was said to us as a real issue prior to the elections from the people we spoke to in New York and San Francisco. That that is a real thing that might have played into the hands of the Republican Party, along with timing. Remember too, where the Republican Party in its last administration was in for the first year of COVID, and then the Biden government took over, and that coincided then a year later too with the high inflation and everything that came from lots of things post-COVID, demand and supply, but also the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and so rightly or wrongly, the impression left in a lot of Americans was that the last 4 years has been a bit harder than the 4 years before, and people tend to sheet blame from what they experience and what they see. Anyway, so that's something that'll have to be watched. The impact of tariffs and all the rest of it. So that's that's a bit of a wait and see thing, and markets and other governments will react as that evolves. One thing that won't change, fortunately, I'm sure, is the comments I made in the last video and the covering email about the US Fed independence. So again, while we might hear a lot about that, the reality is that there's little scope to make wholesale changes there, and even though that might be spoken about a bit, it just seems very unlikely that there'll be any major changes there. What is more likely though, and is any moves to undermine the independence do rattle markets if there's indecision or whatever. So in a roundabout or indirect way, inflationary policies could see the Fed by necessity having to increase interest rates, and that would bring it again into conflict with President Trump, because obviously he doesn't like that. He likes lower rates, weaker dollar, and so again there could be a conflict that's just brought about by circumstances, which could lead to some chest thumping and again uncertainty for markets. But it gets us back to what we've said before, where volatility is a fact of life in markets, so we have to be prepared for that. The deficit's the other big thing, and that was touted before the election too as the big problem, that no party had any real plan for doing anything about the deficit, which is in the high $30 trillion range. So the fact that now there's probably going to be unfettered policy implementation, which is likely to increase the debt. That then is again inflationary. So wait and see. It's excuse me. It's usually the Republican Party's thing to be tighter on spending. So, but a lot of these policies are the other way. So we'll wait and see how that goes. Foreign policies too are the other thing that'll now be a little bit different, with again that both houses of the House and the Senate being open, so it allows the Trump administration just more sway to do what they want to do, scaling back assistance to the Ukraine and taking a harder line on relations with China and Iran and all the rest of it. So as usual, that's a wait and see thing, a diplomacy thing that has implications both ways. So that'll be talked through and sorted, but it'll probably create more noise in the short term. Companies that are impacted again by that kind of volatile geopolitical environment, they're going to have to reassess where they sit, of course, and track these developments pretty closely for knock-on effects. But again, that's what businesses have to do. Anyway, it's just an extra thing for them to watch. American markets reacted favourably. It's going, the share market, it's going pretty well. Australia has as well, with a jump yesterday, although today it's come off a little bit so far. Today's Thursday, so look, once again, most volatility is a short-term concern rather than a long-term thing, so there'll be a sorting out period here as usual, and once again revert to the old chestnut of using volatility to our advantage, where active investment managers, good ones, can find bargains in times like this. So again, if you're placed to ride through things, which our clients are, we have our meetings, we keep sort of on top of what's happening, and again, we can watch on the sidelines and just see how things go. It'll be interesting if nothing else. Well, it'll be interesting, full stop. Look, that's probably enough. Quick update. There was an election result that was not expected. As it was the most likely outcome was a narrow thing. So so this being the case, it certainly does change the way things might unfold. But let's wait and see. Markets like certainty one way or the other, so we'll wait and see how it flows out. But we'll be in touch all the time, and urge you to be in touch too whenever you need to. Take care. See ya.